Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Steve Horler. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer at Railings, and today I'd like to talk to you about how you can unleash the hidden value within your supply chain. As a case study, we're going to use a Fortune 500 company that did actually transform their supply chain by leveraging managerial science, world-class processes, and quality data. It's important to know where they began. They were perceived throughout the organization of being very, very tactical. The procurement department's perceived value was to buy materials, and the logistics department perceived value was to ship finished products. Very tactical view. So transforming your supply chain from a tactical necessity to a strategic asset meant they had to embark on a transformational journey that actually touched all aspects of the organization. They created shareholder value, they outpaced their competitors, and they delivered fast, credible, and legitimate business results. So the result of that was they changed the entire perception of the organization, including the C-suite, about the logistics, supply chain, and procurement organizations. To do the transformation, they followed 5 steps. Number one, they realized that they had to become strategically relevant to the organization from the top down. Number two, they deployed some world-class processes and tools. Number three, they realized the importance of foundational procurement techniques within their supply chain. Number four, they understood the value of quality data that was accurate, timely, and complete. And what's interesting in quality data is when you think about timeliness. Most people, when they think about timeliness, is how soon do I get the data after the event? Whilst that's important, the other challenge a lot of people will have is they're asked by the CFO to create a report on a Friday afternoon comparing this month to 3 months ago or some random data set comparison, and they have the data. The problem is it's in 17 different Excel spreadsheets and it's owned by 14 different people in 3 different ERP systems. So when you think about timely data, also think about accessibility. That's part of being timely. And then finally, they leverage some leading edge tools to execute on their most complex initiatives. So what I've done here is I've kind of thought about the 5 interconnected modules that they have: strategic relevance, world-class processes, foundational procurement, quality data, and leading edge tools. I'm going to start off this afternoon talking about how do we become strategically relevant? How did this organization change that tactical view the organization had to that strategic view? So how do you do this? To become strategically relevant, you have to increase value for the shareholders and investors. If you think about a CEO, his job is to increase value for the shareholders and investors. So there are a number of ways of looking at that. The way this organization began to look at it is return on net tangible assets. That is one of the biggest drivers of stock price. Now, I recognize you can use return on net tangible assets, or potentially you can use return on assets. You know, it depends a little bit if you have goodwill or other things which are non-tangible. So thinking about that, what does that really mean simplistically? What it really means is how much value do you create in relationship to how much cash you've deployed? So if you think about a stockholder, if they invest $100 into an organization and you're giving them a $50 return, you're doing much better than if you invest $100 and you only get an annual $25 return. So return on assets or return on net tangible assets really does have a direct correlation with shareholder value, with stock price. So if we can communicate to our organizations how we're impacting value, I think we have a different conversation. So how do I join the dots about what I just said? Well, I like to do it 2 ways. One is what I call the financial ratio module, and the other is what I call the executable business model. Now, in brackets after, I've got the CFO, CEO, and COO. Those aren't necessarily right for every organization. It does depend a little bit on the background of the C-level suite, which of these two tools will resonate the most with them. But what they both do is they allow you to demonstrate to the C-suite the financial and strategic relevance of supply chain. So we're going to begin and talk about the financial ratio module. So return on assets is really net profit margin, the product of net profit margin and asset turnover. And net profit margin is really net profit divided by net sales. And asset turnover is your revenue divided by total assets. So we're kind of right in the middle here of financial speak. And now we're clicking on a little bit and we're getting a little more close to the supply chain area because we're talking about gross margin, total expenses, and current and fixed assets. You know, fixed assets is interesting because in situations like this year, those organizations with variable assets rather than fixed assets were able to respond much quicker to changes in business caused by external events. And this is where it gets interesting. Now we're beginning to talk about things that supply chain people begin to think about or talk about or work on. You know, they may be working on cost of goods sold. That's right in the wheelhouse of procurement. The logistics department will be working on transportation costs. You know, maybe network design people in supply chain are looking at inventory. So you're beginning to see how on the left-hand side of the screen, you've got strategically relevant things for the C-level suite. And now you have line of sight to the actual work that is being done by your teams. We can actually drill in even further. And the gray buckets are things that you typically would have projects on. So as we're short of time today, I'm not going to go through all of these, but I will touch on a couple of them. If you look at transportation cost, maybe that you need to leverage the enterprise size and scale to drive better transportation costs. Maybe you need a new LTL mode strategy. So what I'm saying here is when you think about, I'm going to have a less than truckload mode strategy to save money, that's one way of framing it. But the other way is I'm having a comprehensive mode strategy in LTL to lower the transportation costs, which impacts my total expenses. And therefore, I have a better impact on the net margin of the business, which ultimately means there's a better return on investment. What is interesting on this sheet is you don't see the word savings, because savings is a very tactical word. Really, we want to transition and talk about value. If you look at the bottom of this sheet, you'll see warehouse management and network design. So if you are responsible for warehousing and you remove a warehouse, not only are you impacting operational costs, but you're also impacting fixed assets. So you're impacting the numerator and the denominator of return on net tangible assets. So you're having a double impact on increasing shareholder value. So if you think about what I've talked about, it really does show that you can link everything that you do in supply chain clearly with line of sight to the financial relevance of it, which will ultimately drive shareholder value. The other kind of fun thing when you look at this is a lot of people in supply chain work very, very hard in the area that I've circled with a blue, in blue. A lot of that is hidden. So you're doing an awful lot on inventory carrying costs, but it gets hidden and you get a target of, well, lower inventory or optimize inventory. Now you have the opportunity of really tying that exactly to how the value is added to the organization. There are two ways to join the dots. I said that before. So that was the financial ratio module. The next module is more rubber hits the road business, less financial speak. But again, it will allow you to demonstrate to the C-level suite the financial and strategic relevance of your supply chain. So the executable business model. Same goal. We want to increase value for shareholders and investors, but rather than use financial speak, we're using more business terms here. There are three things which are critical to increase value for shareholders. One is profitable growth. You're growing the business profitably. The second is margin improvement. Are we lowering costs within the business and improving our margin by raising price? And then the final one is capital efficiency. Every single thing you do should be tied back to profitable growth, margin improvement, or capital efficiency. So let's think about profitable growth. In supply chain, are you capturing new markets and customers and helping that occur? If you are, you're impacting profitable growth. Are you enabling the organization to outperform their competitors? If so, you're enabling profitable growth. From a margin perspective, right in the wheelhouse of procurement, you're reducing the cost of goods sold, so you're improving the margin of the business. If the margin is better, if you are the lowest cost supplier, you have the opportunity to win any business you want to win. And then are you helping improve the speed and productivity? So these are more operational things like lean manufacturing, Six Sigma, removal of waste, reduction of variation. And then from a capital efficiency viewpoint, working capital and reducing fixed assets. As I think I mentioned earlier, the difference between fixed and variable assets becomes very critical in situations whereby you have to rapidly change the business. So if you imagine that you have an initiative in reducing fixed assets and changing them to variable, then rather than just speak in terms of I'm doing X or Y, you're actually drawing line of sight back to the value you've created. So I've highlighted a few value drivers here. Strategy and world-class processes will enable those actions to occur. Yeah, your innovation, flexible, and agility of the supply chain will enable that to occur. So if you have a project to make the supply chain more agile, then you can talk and speak in your organization about, well, I'm actually helping profitable growth of the organization through having a more agile supply chain. And then obviously a lot of these improvements need to be driven through quality data. We're now looking at margin improvement. Foundational procurement excellence, which is one of these modules, is critical. You have to make sure you're buying things in an efficient and effective manner. And then visibility will also enable you to ensure that your procurement is world-class and you have the data to do that. Improving the speed and the productivity, typical that has an information technology component, but it also has a network design component. The way I like to look at things in supply chain is, do we have a lean supply chain or do we have an agile supply chain? A lean supply chain is the lowest cost, you've eliminated all of the waste, but it's not very responsive. If you have an agile supply chain, you can respond to outside influences very, very quickly. But there's a cost premium to do that, so you have to balance the two and explain to your organization why. And then from a capital efficiency viewpoint, you have using leading edge tools will really help you manage your inventory. That will, it opens up opportunities like supply chain financing or terms management. Terms are interesting. When people talk about terms, they often say we pay people net 30, net 45, net 60. We've all heard that. How many people here have heard, oh, we pay our vendors net 33, net 48, net 62? 1 day's cash can be, for a multi-billion-dollar organization, can be hundreds of millions of dollars. So never forget that terms don't have to be 30, 45, and 60. And then when you're talking about make versus buy initiatives, yeah, you're really talking about creating an agile supply chain as you move from a make to a buy. So you will see here how the things that you work on, the value drivers, filter back to the left to increase value for shareholders. So the bottom line of both of these two models is they both demonstrate to the C-suite the strategic relevance of supply chain. And some people may think, well, why is that important? It's critical because if you are strategically relevant, then when you need to have the resources of the organization, you get acceptance of that quickly. So that resource might be, I need more people, or in a lot of companies, I don't want to cut anyone. So from a headcount management viewpoint, if you are demonstrating relevance, then you have demonstrated knowledge and ability to say there is a return on investment of each of my people. So that's a great concept to think about. What is the return on investment of hiring someone? Many times people will develop the return on investment on a capital piece of equipment. I'm saying there's value in demonstrating the return on investment on a human asset as well, and that enables you to grow. If you need IT support, is your project being worked on, or is it on the list being worked on next year? If you've demonstrated the strategic relevance of your organization and then the value it has to the shareholders and investors, you're much more likely to get that IT work and support. So that's why it's so important. It actually makes you, as leaders of supply chain, look good in your organization. So I've spent a little bit of time today talking about the strategic relevance piece of the 5 interconnected modules, which leaves world-class processes, foundational procurement, which is fun, quality data is really interesting, and then doing some work on leading edge tools which give you great visibility are also all key elements of being successful here. So as our slot here is limited, this is where I will kind of think about ending the presentation. But if any of those other modules resonated with you, or if the first strategic relevance resonated with you, feel free to reach out and we can share the content on the other modules. I'd like to thank you for your time. I hope you found the presentation interesting. Thank you very much.